Hello, everybody. I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. And so, The Good Master is a book that I probably still own. I actually wasn't able to find a copy of it, so I had to get an ebook version from the Open Library, which I will link to in the description. Um, the thing about the Open Library is it's very, very useful for finding a whole lot of books that are not easy to find elsewhere. So I was able to get a copy of this book from there and reread it for you all because this was one of the books that I had sort of half been thinking of specifically when I first started doing this channel. Um, the Good Master is by, as you can see on this cover here, Kate Seredy or something. I don't actually know any Hungarian, so I don't know how to pronounce it correctly. And Hungarian comes into this not just because this is set in Hungary, but because I assume that Ms. Seredy's last name is a Hungarian one, given her particular literary fixation with Hungary, and various other things like that. This is the cover on my copy. I don't know where my copy is, but this is what the cover is on the one that I had as a kid. I don't know if it's been reprinted recently. This is a book that was first published in 1935. It's set in the years before World War One, which is made particularly clear because the sequel to this, The Singing Tree, which I will be talking about next week, The Singing Tree is during World War One, and so this taking place immediately before that is obviously from, I would guess, somewhere in 1908 to 1910, I don't know. 1911, 12, 13, since I have not had a chance yet to reread the book after this one, I couldn't tell you for sure, and Kate Seredy clearly didn't place these specifically in time. You can place the second book specifically in time because Martin Nagy, however that's supposed to be pronounced, the pater familias, he gets drafted into the war, so that tells you in that first two chapters the date approximately of the book. But this one, because it takes place before, and I don't remember how much of a gap there is between the two books in terms of internal chronology, I can't answer the question about when it is. So this is a book about a girl whose name is, oddly enough, Kate, and she is very much a tomboy. It's one of the very likable things about her is that she's not particularly girly. She's not anti-girly. It's not that she's one of those girls who goes, "Oh, skirts, ew, that's the worst thing ever." It's more just that she finds the stuff that her cousin Yancy is doing to be more interesting than the stuff that she's supposed to be doing. And so she winds up wearing boys' clothes in a lot of times in the book because she's doing boy stuff. So they put her in regular, trousers and vests and things such as boys would wear. So it book opens with this lovely little portrait. In my copy, the portrait wouldn't have been in color because it was a Scholastic paperback, and this particular version of the book is an older printing from the 1950s, because Open Library, in a lot of cases, just does straight scans of the books, and so this is actually from a scan of a physical hard copy book, as opposed to being an ebook. On the left is Kate, and on the right is Yancey. Um, Now, this is a very tiny picture, and I apologize I didn't get it blown up properly. But this is Kate, who shoved her cousin Yancey off. Kate gets sent to. Let's start at the beginning. Kate gets sent away from the city to stay with her uncle and on her uncle's farm out in the country. Now, the thing about Kate is that she had apparently had an illness, the chicken pox or something, and her father basically wanted to get her out of the city into some place where she might have a chance to get a little bit healthier. And the book opens with Yancey's perspective as he thinks about how his cousin Kate is going to arrive, and he thinks that she will be delicate and girly and have curly blonde hair and wear pink silk dresses and things. And when Kate arrives, she is active and highly mischievous and a lot of trouble. And when she's put on the and she gets put up onto a wagon which is taking them, which her uncle Martin. I don't know how you pronounce things in how you would pronounce these names properly in Hungarian. Like I said, I don't know Hungarian. Anyways, but her uncle is driving them home on a wagon because it's the 1930s and it's out in the country, and nobody's going to have cars that far out in the 1930s in, rural areas in Central Europe. So they're going along, and she shoves her cousin off of the wagon, and when her uncle hops down off to help his son back up, she grabs the reins and whips the horses into a frenzy, and they go just hurtling off down the road, with Kate, as you can see in this picture, standing up on the wagon, acting like it's a chariot in Ben-Hur, which is literally the reference that she gives. It's a very, very exciting scene because Yancey and his father Martin, they have to grab a couple of half-broken horses and ride them bareback to catch up with her. And when they arrive, Yancey's mother is under the impression that Kate is a poor motherless thing who needs to be coddled and petted and cosseted, and Kate takes undue advantage of this. In fact, Yancey's mother keeps on doing that until after dinner, when they discover Kate has climbed up into the rafters and is eating her way through their store of sausages dangling from the rafters. They thought it was mice. It turned out that it was Kate, who had climbed up onto their stove, onto their oven, which is an enormous beehive-shaped thing in the corner, and used that to make it up there. Unfortunately, of course, once the oven has been has been used to cook dinner, it's too hot for her to climb back down from there. And so Kate winds up having to stay up on the ceiling for several hours until her uncle finally rescues her. And as the book goes on, you get to... One of the things that you can see in this book is how much Kate Seredy loves the culture, the Hungarian culture, loves these folk tales that I am very much certain are traditional folk tales. She's best known for her book, The White Stag, which is I suppose you could call it the creation myth of Hungary, much like in, say, Mexico, that Mexicans have the story of an eagle that landed on a cactus or something out in Mexico, and so that was where they decided to set up Mexico City. Most nations, groups have an origin story, and Hungary is no different, with their belief that the Huns and of the distant past of Attila the Hun came through and are the origin, the basis behind their nation. Now, it's less factual, and Kate Seredy, in her novel, sort of novelization of this national creation myth, um, she tells the story with the understanding that this is not borne out by necessarily historical evidence, but that this this story is formative in terms of the psyche, the history of the country, because it's how they see themselves. And these stories, that story as well, being in this novel, it's a glimpse into the culture. And I have here just another of the illustrations from this book. There are a lot of illustrations, and they're all lovely illustrations like this. This is at the fair when Yancy, who is dancing with Kate here, has paid the gypsy musicians to play Exardas. And so everybody is now dancing because they're enjoying, you know, being out there and dancing. I didn't want to put in too many pictures, but they're all of this caliber that is fairly nice, very evocative. Um, and the book goes through various adventures and misadventures and tall tales and traditional stories. Um, and at the end of the book, Kate's father, Sandor, who, as I said at the beginning, he sent his daughter out to stay with his brother in the country because he wanted his daughter to, you know, get better, that she had been ill and he wanted her to recover. And he he comes out to the country and in the end decides that he's going to move back there in something that's very reflective of that trope of, you know, people who belong in the country and who love it and want to come back and do so. Um, it's that part of the story isn't exciting or interesting, but there's a lot in this that, again, this is one of those very good books for kids. Putting aside the depiction of gypsies as thieves and scoundrels, etc., etc. Um, I never took that away from it as a general statement when I was a kid, but then again, I wasn't. But then again, I wasn't raised in a household where something like that would have been considered acceptable thinking, anyways. So it's one of those things you might want to guard against. But what's very good about this book is, as I always say about giving children books from previous eras, is it's about putting them into the mindset and the understanding of another time, of a time when, at the beginning of this book, Yancey, he says, it's made very clear at the start of this book that Yancey doesn't know how to read, and he doesn't feel the lack. He's 10 years old, and he doesn't know how to read. He can't read a single letter. He doesn't, not even a bit. 3/4 of the way through the book, Kate actually is set up to have a sort of a school because she's the only one of them who can read because her father is a school teacher, and she's able to sit there and start teaching these grown men, these shepherds, but they're grown men who don't know how to read, and she's able to start teaching them to read. Now, I would assume that if this book was in Hungarian, the examples would be different because, of course, it's written in English, and so the way it goes is in English. But, you know, it's a different time, and I always think it's important for kids to read books like this because it helps them understand a time when you couldn't just phone for help. And I'm running out of time, and I just recommend this as a good, clean, fun read for kids. And I'll see you all next week with the sequel.